Hi friends, how's it going? It's Endymion here, the Wandering Hermit. I've not posted a video for a long time because life's just been getting in the way of everything. Life's been getting in the way of life. So, this is the first time in a good few months that I've had the time and the inclination to actually do a video. And I thought, what could I do a video about? It's 2020, what do we want to talk about? And out of all the different things that I've talked about in my videos, there's one video that I've never done, which is influential reading list. Now, I see a lot of other YouTubers putting up, their essential reading list for 2020 and things like that, but my reading list is now far too big, so I thought I'd, much be better off talking about the books that have influenced my craft and my worldview and things like that. In the hope that maybe it can inspire some of you to go and read these books yourselves, and hope that it gives you the same sort of the same information, the same inspiration that they gave me anyway. So I'm just going to jump straight into it. Now, when I actually first got onto the path of exploring the nature of reality and the nature of nature, about 15 years ago now, one of the first things I did was to look at the actual workings of the physical universe. I was really into science, biology and physics primarily, and one of the first books that I read on my sort of intellectual journey was a bit of a weird one, considering the majority of my videos are pagan oriented, but the first book that I ever read on the subject was A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. And this book, as small as it is, it's only a tiny book, but it's it's one of his, it's his magnum opus really. This really opened my mind to the possibility that anything was possible. He talks about the the bending of matter by gravity. He talks about loopholes in time. He talks about the idea of tangent universes, which he actually expands upon in another book. But most importantly, most importantly to me, he spoke very briefly about how the universe as we know it actually has no discernible center. We all talk about the center of the universe and the genesis point from which the Big Bang occurred. But he said, I can't even find the passage, but he talks about how because all matter is moving away from everything else in all directions at a consistent rate, and all matter is so evenly sort of divided and spread out, he said any point within that mess could be regarded as the center. And this was an intriguing idea to me, and it was something which fed into my spiritual practice later on, so I'll talk about that later. Now, I'm going through all of the sort of sciencey books first, because that's where my journey started. Then I'm going to go on to philosophy, mythology, and finally magic itself. So the next book that I read, which I would seriously recommend to your perusal, is Uriels Machine by Christopher Knight and Robert Lomas. These guys, some of the work they do, I mean, a lot of it's on Freemasonry and the history of Freemasonry, but this particular book talks about the origins of stone circles and other megalithic structures. And they talk about how all the sacred sites that they visited all across the British Isles, because it is focused in the British Isles, are all aligned to certain planets or certain stars at certain times of the year. For example, Newgrange in Ireland aligned to the heliacal rising of Sirius on the winter solstice. And another alignment is to that of Venus, so that the light of Venus can actually shine into the central chamber of the burial mound. And that's just one example. The book's crammed full of them, but it's a really fascinating read, and it's very conversational, the way it's written, so it's really easy to get into, but there's so much in there with regards to archaeoastrology, you know, the astroarchaeology, I should say, and how that links into ancient scriptures, and how scriptures such as the Bible are talking about these astrological alignments. That really influenced me in a very, very profound way, because it made me understand just how wise our ancestors were, and again reshaped my idea of the world and how we view our relationship between the earth and the, you know, the cosmos around us. So after that, this next book really caught my eye when I was in Waterstones, the Hidden Science of Lost Civilizations. Now, David Wilcock, love him or hate him, but this being one of his first books that he ever wrote, this was back when he was just spitting truth, you know, without any regard to any criticism or anything else. Now, the sheer wealth of information and knowledge in this book to do with the formation of human DNA, cosmic radiation and its effect on organic life, acoustic levitation of stones. This story really fascinated me. You can read it yourself, but it's a British anthropologist hears from a Scandinavian doctor who visited Tibet, and the monks demonstrated how they can levitate massive blocks of stone with just their voices and some drums and trumpets. Really fascinating stuff. But again, this expanded my interest in the realms of what you'd call pseudoscience or fringe science. Pushed me so much deeper into the realm of quantum physics. But you know, he talks about other stuff like Zoroastrianism, ancient Greek philosophy, and you know how all the ancient wisdom is encoded in those traditions. So that was a really interesting book for me. Now, this guy, Andrew Collins, is an absolute diamond of an author. Especially this book, The Cygnus Mystery. There's another book of his called From the Ashes of Angels, which I only partially read, so I didn't include it in this list, but from what I have read of it, again, it's an extremely influential book. But this one made me understand in much deeper detail how the stars and the planets affect our DNA, and how the passage and the movement of the cosmos has actually influenced the evolution of our kind. Not just on a sort of biological level, but on a spiritual level as well. It's sort of the dawn of civilization as a result of certain, you know, cosmological alignments and things, and how we honoured that through the building of our most sacred ancient sites, such as the Sphinx on the Giza Plateau and Stonehenge and all those. But this is absolutely fascinating book. His theory is that a majority of the ancient sites were aligned to the constellation of Cygnus, or the Northern Cross, which is at the top of the sky during the winter solstice. And he ties it into certain studies which indicate that there was a blast of cosmic radiation from that star system at a time that corresponds to a massive leap forward in evolution, not just of humans, but of all life on the planet. Again, really interesting. But the way he writes is just so, again, conversational, but he displays a wisdom that is so much older than he is as a person. It's like he's got lifetimes of accumulated knowledge there. Brilliant author. Now, this next book is more in terms of the inner journeys as opposed to the outer journeys and, you know, internal knowledge. This is Jeremy Narby's The Cosmic Serpent, and this talks about sort of shamanic journey through the use of psychedelics. Now, Jeremy Narby is an anthropologist who's gone and studied numerous tribes around the world, but this particular book, he's talking about the tribes of the Amazon rainforest and their use of the visionary brew ayahuasca, and his experience of that, and then how that's propelled him on a journey of going around and trying to discover if there's a common thread in the visions that people are having and things like that, to better understand the nature of psychedelic experience and how it can open us up to knowledge that we wouldn't all otherwise have, you know, spirit communication and things like that. It's, I don't know, this just completely blew my mind. and at the time I was sort of on the fence of, oh yeah, hallucinogens a good idea or not, you know, are people just using them for fun or whatever. I didn't want to have any part in it. But this made me think a bit deeper about the nature of the human mind and the human experience, and how we connect to nature on a spiritual level. It kind of convinced me that maybe hallucinogenic substances can be useful if taken in the right set and the right setting. Set and setting is actually a term that's used by Graham Hancock in his book Supernatural, which is based on the same subject. But it's all about being in the right place with the right people, with the right atmosphere, and most importantly, with the right intention. But yeah, if you've got all of those things set, then you know the hallucinogenic journey is actually a very, very powerful one. And I've since been on that kind of journey myself a good couple of times. And it has given me really, really deep insight into the nature of myself and my spiritual journey. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, Cosmic Serpent and Graham Hancock's Supernatural, I would definitely recommend. Again, I've only partially read Hancock's book on the subject, so again, I didn't include it in this list, but let's move on. Now, Michael Hayes, very, very intelligent dude. But this particular book, The Hermetic Code in DNA, made me understand the scientific nature behind sympathetic correspondences and how they are used in magic. Now, he looks at it purely from an intellectualist angle, not from a magician's angle, but he just nails it. There are a couple of bits in this book that made me sort of question what I'd come to know at that point about correspondences and things like that. So, I disagreed on certain parts, but later on in my study, those gaps were filled in by other authors, which then made me understand his work a lot better. So it is a bit of a heavy read to start with, because it's very mathematical, it's very scientific, but if you can persevere with it, then it can really open you up to understanding the nature of how everything is connected in the universe. Colours, sounds, certain shapes and patterns, and how all of that is represented in nature, and how nature represents us, and we represent nature, vice versa, blah, blah, blah. So, again, a very, very good book to read, and that really sort of propelled me forward on the scientific spiritualism path that I was on many, many years ago. Last but not least in this particular pile is Dean Radin's The Noetic Universe. Now, this book focuses on the idea that parapsychological phenomena really kind of have a very powerful effect on physical reality. How our thoughts and our emotions can actually influence physical events outside of ourselves. And this kind of builds upon the Hermetic maxim, as above, so below, but as within, so without. Absolutely brilliant. It's so straightforward. It's really easy to understand. But it clarifies so much with regards to the mind over matter theory, and how we as thinking beings are thereby co-creators with, in the divine order of things, and how we're actually shaping the physical world with our thoughts and our actions and our emotions and words. Really, really good book to read. If you are looking into consciousness sciences, this is one book I would definitely recommend. So, science out of the way. When you come to understand the physical workings of things, or I say understand, when you start to look at the physical workings of things and dip your toes into that very, very, very deep pool of knowledge, you then end up moving on to the intellectual, philosophical side of things. So this next pile is about the philosophical side of things. I'm going to try to whiz through this because I'm already at 14 minutes. So, first and foremost, Secret History of the World by Jonathan Black. Really, really brilliant book. Really, really simple. but it goes through so many different cultures throughout human history, and it breaks them down and explains the philosophical concepts and the symbolism and how it ties into the nature of human experience and human interaction with each other and with the natural world. Really, really good book. If you're new on your path, this is definitely a book to start with. If you haven't already got it, I mean, a lot of people do, because it's everywhere. You go into Waterstones, it's bound to be there. There's also the Sacred History of the World, which is the sequel to this, which I'm currently reading. Again, very, very good book. I would recommend them both. Now, Sir Lawrence Gardner, the late Sir Lawrence Gardner. These two books really, 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 really helped me in so many ways, because I don't know, when it comes to my spiritual path and the nature of good and evil, and the nature of the sort of cosmic struggle between light and darkness and all that, somehow these books explained it to me. Now, Realm of the Ring Lords, it starts off by talking about the works of J.R.R. Tolkien and how he's sort of encoded the secret history of our civilization into his works with the Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings. But then he goes on and expands on that by analysing other legends and myths, and explains their origins and how it links to real world culture, and how that's relevant to today's life. And with this, he's talking about the truth of the messianic bloodline, the bloodline of Christ and all that, and how it goes much, much, much further back, before the time of Christ, and how it's a sacred tradition which has endured for thousands of years, and how the people who have vested interest in that, the different societies, the different groups involved in that sort of the idea of sacred bloodlines, still exist today, and how they influence our society. Not in a sort of Illuminati occult conspiracy kind of way, but in a really academic, genealogical kind of way. But again, it puts so much into perspective with the way our world is going, the way our society has gone. I don't know, I just really recommend these two books. He's got loads of other books talking about, again, the history of Freemasonry and the Knights Templar and things like that. But these two books are the ones that stick out to me. Now, Adrian Gilbert, British historian, he's obviously, as you can tell by the title, his primary focus is the Ithorian Legend and the bloodline of Arthur. This particular book kind of expands in some ways on Genesis of the Grail Kings, but goes off on a different tangent. Gardner only sort of touches on the Arthurian side of things, but Gilbert really sort of delves into it and shows you the historical fact behind the legends. Really, really good book. Really straightforward, simple to read. Really enjoyed it. If you're interested in the Arthurian legend and the Arthurian path, if you're an Arthurian magician, then this is really, really good. So I'd recommend that. And the greatest book of them all, when it comes to ancient philosophy and things like that, is Manley P Horse, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. If you've not heard of this book, then where the hell have you been your whole life? This guy is an absolute prophet. He was an American in the 1920s, 30s, basically early 20th century, with access to an occult library, the likes of which none of us can imagine. And he wrote this, his magnum opus. So much is the depth and truth in this book that he was made an honorary 33rd degree Mason after he died. United Grand Lodge of England and the United Grand Lodge of the US both recognised him as an honorary Mason of the highest order, because the amount of knowledge that he has in this, of history, of philosophy, of occult symbolism, it's second to none. It's a hefty read. It's a doorstop. It took me a year to get through this, but again, I would recommend you persevere with it. It's absolutely brilliant. So, now that we've got all the heavy stuff out of the way, let's move on to the nice light stuff. Now, I mentioned Tolkien. Tolkien's work, I've only brought up the Silmarillion because it kind of epitomises Tolkien's work. This doesn't follow any one character. It's a history of different characters through the first age of Middle-earth, but it echoes actual mythological stories, creation stories, and ancient legends of heroes and things like that so closely. It feels real, and reading this kind of gives me a jumping off point to look at other mythologies and other legends and understand them a little bit better and link them back. It's kind of an anchor to the real world. But really, really good book. But all of Tolkien's work is just so rich. It's so imaginative and so fanciful. I mean, the guy gets criticism for not being able to write complex storylines, but the way he creates worlds, the way he creates characters is second to none. And Tolkien's work propelled me into the world of fantasy, and fantasy threw me into the world of magic and of spirits and of elves and of, you know, angels and demons. I think without Tolkien's work I wouldn't be half as much of a spiritual person as I am. So, you know, as dry as his work can be to some people, you know, I'd definitely recommend you at least try to read Tolkien's work, because it's absolutely brilliant. Now, these two books, I'll start with Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Now, everybody should read this. Absolutely everybody, because even though the philosophy is focused around military strategy, the knowledge and wisdom in this book can be applied to absolutely any walk of life. Businessmen use it all the time, you're probably well aware of that. But after finally reading this a good couple of times, it makes you understand human nature, human thought, human behaviour so much better. And you can also almost predict what you're going to do before you even know you're going to do it. And you can predict what other people are going to do before they do it. It gives you so much insight into human interaction and the way in which we move through the world. It's just a brilliant book, and it's a must read for anyone who's serious about understanding themselves and understanding the world. Likewise, The Five Rings, or the Book of Five Rings, the original title was Gorin no Sho by Miyamoto Musashi. Now, this book, not this particular volume, but another version of this book was bought for me many, many years ago when I was quite young. And it focuses on the five alchemical elements, the Western elements. So you've got fire, earth, water, air. But rather than spirit, he's listed it as void in this. And he sort of talks about, I don't know, human psychology. You know, he talks very philosophically as well. But it's a guide on how to live, how to act in accordance with those elements. It's very, very hard to describe, but it's such a deep book. It's a very, very meaningful book. It's very, very rich. And I would definitely recommend this. Now, Musashi was a samurai warrior way, way back, medieval period. One of the most famous swordsmen in Japan. So he writes from the perspective of a warrior, of a swordsman, but again, he draws comparison between the farmer, you know, the trader, the woodworker, the teacher. So the wisdom that's encased in this book, again, can be applied to any walk of life. It can and will have some significance to you on a personal level. So give this book a read, and let me know in the comments what you think, because this book absolutely changed my life. As I say, I got this when I was about 10, 11 maybe, as a gift. But definitely highly recommended. And finally, because you know, you all know that I'm on a pagan path, but focused on the Norse pantheon. That's my root tradition. So, the Book of Norse Myths. I read. Oh, I've got it here actually. The Poetic Edda, naturally. Any self-respecting Norse pagan has to have read the Eddas at some point. But you know, this book, this very nice volume that I got from my wife for Christmas this Christmas just gone. It takes all of those stories, not just from the poetic, but from the prose Edda. It has little bits from the sagas in there, and it puts them all into this really sort of nice compact format. Breaks them down. You get verses from the poems, but then it kind of explains what is happening in each of them. So it breaks it down and makes the stories very easy to understand, because the poetic forms can be quite difficult to follow. So this book, if you're new to Norse paganism, if you're just interested in Norse mythology, this is really good to start with. Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology as well. I do have that, but I can't find it to save my life. That I would also recommend. It is on this list, I just don't have it with me. So those two books are an absolute must if you're interested in Norse mythology. So give those a read. Finally, because we're on, coming up to half an hour. Magic books. First book I ever read on magic is Earth Power by Scott Cunningham. Now this is a really small volume, really basic, but it's a brilliant starting point. If you don't know where to begin with ritual magic, this is absolutely perfect for you, because it goes through elemental magic as the fundamental basis of any kind of witchcraft rite. Really simple, but really essential knowledge of the workings of the elements and casting a circle and things like that. To expand on that, Edred Thorsens' Northern Magic. Now, in a very similar way, small book, really simple to follow, simple to understand, but absolutely brilliant for knowledge. It gives you symbols and their meanings. It walks you through the Futhark and basic understanding of that for a divinatory purpose. The Wheel of the Year and the Troth. There's stuff on... there we go. Icelandic runic sigils. It's really good. Solid information for practicing as a northern pagan, whether you're specifically Norse or whether you kind of have Celtic elements. There are similarities, so reading that book can really give you a good jumping off point for starting your magical practice. Sacred Ceremony by Stephen Farmer is a fantastic book to help you understand the purpose and the nature and the mechanics of crafting sacred ceremonies, actual rituals specifically for certain things, to honour the time of the year, to honour the passing of ancestors, to honour the birth of children, to rites of passage and things like that. This guy is just... He's such a dude. He's so relaxed, he's so chilled out, so conversational, but he's just so knowledgeable as well. And this book really threw me into ritual magic, whereas before I was a bit tenuous on crafting ceremonies, not just ritual spells, but actual ceremonies. This guy helped me through it. So I definitely recommend this book. He's written many other books as well. I recommend them all, to be honest. Earth Power. He's also got an oracle card deck of the same title, Earth Power. Sorry, Earth Magic, not Earth Power. But yeah, all of Stephen Farmer's work, really good. Tarot. If you're interested in tarot, other than 78 Degrees of Wisdom, which I'm only halfway through, so again I've not included it here, but it's a fantastic book for understanding tarot. But this book, Phantasmagoria. Now, this is actually a guidebook for a tarot deck called the Tower of Vampires by Ian Daniels. It's probably my all-time favourite tarot deck to use. And this guidebook is just second to none. It's chunky, but it doesn't just talk about this particular deck. It can be expanded to all tarot decks, and it gives you such an in-depth understanding of how tarot works and the nature of the symbolism and how it affects us on a subconscious level. Just, there are no words for it. Incredible piece of work. The guy is a genius. As is this dude, an eccentric but a genius. Runic John, the Book of Said. Now, my path is you know, as a pagan, you know, Norse pagan. But the way I practice is very shamanic, and this book not only confirmed that what I was doing instinctually was kind of on the right path, but it also filled in gaps in my knowledge as well. Sed as a tradition encompasses kind of all of Northern Europe and Scandinavia. So if you're Celtic, Sed, it covers that as well. He talks primarily from a Norse and Anglo-Saxon perspective, but overall, just this book is just absolutely brilliant. It gives you so much knowledge about the tradition, the background of traditions, journeying to meet your drums and your rattles, journeying to meet spirit guides, animal spirit guides, journeying to meet ancestors, the Kinfilgia, the Wheels of Might, which are kind of like the chakras, but in Norse tradition and Anglo-Saxon tradition. There is also a Celtic version of the chakras as well, so it, you know, it ties in quite nicely. Different tools of the craft, communing with the Aesir and the Vanir, obviously from a Norse POV. Goes through the different gods of the pantheon, of the two pantheons quite nicely, really. Talks about different classes of spirit, wights and geists, drog, you know, various other things. But it's just such an in-depth book, and so easy to follow. The guy's really laid back and as I say, quite quirky in the way he talks. He writes as he talks, and he's like he's one of those types with these like really staunch Northern British accent. But you know, he's really good, really good. Definitely recommend that book if you can get it quite cheap, because sometimes you look online and it's really expensive. I got mine for about 13 quid, so I was quite lucky. Katie Gerard's Odin's Gateways. Now this, again, is such a small book, but it's crammed full of useful information about the runes. Not just the runes for divinatory purpose, but then it goes into crafting sigils for spells. It talks about using them for healing, using them for sleep, bind runes, runic alphabet, talismans. How the runes link to different deities and different classes of spirit. It's just it's absolutely brilliant. So if you're looking into rune magic, other than the works of Edward Thorsen, who, you know, is kind of an authority on rune lore, this book I would definitely recommend as further reading. And oh no, I can't say last but not least, this is the book that I'm currently reading along with two others. David Conway's Magic and Occult Primer. Now it is a book for starting off on a path, but because I've been so shamanically focused, I've been drawn to look more at the occult, sort of the Hermetic and the Kabbalistic side of it as well, to balance that out, because shamanism's very, very earthy, whereas occultism's very sort of out there, like kind of out in the ethereal space kind of practice. So I've been reading this as a means of balancing my path a little bit, and it's so much better than I expected. He talks about it kind of scientifically, but he doesn't reduce it, he doesn't diminish ritual magic and occultism in any way. He just makes it really, really down to earth and easy to understand. So if you are on more of an occultist path, if you're looking into the Golden Dawn or the works of Aleister Crowley or Madame Blavatsky, this book is a really good reference book for you, so I'd recommend that. Now, last but not least, one of the first books I ever got when I started on my path as a magician, before I got into paganism, before I got into shamanism, when I was still kind of dipping into the sort of Christian, Judeo-Christian magic elements of it. I still use this book today. It's the Magician's Tables. If you can find this book anywhere, get it. As you can see, it's absolutely battered. I've had it for about 12 or 13 years, and it's served me so well. It is what it says. It's a book of correspondences for magic. You know, it talks about the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. It goes through loads of different traditions and colour symbolism, numerology, astrology. Yeah, there's your astrology, zodiac signs. You've got like assorted angels and demons further on. You've got Egyptian magic. Yeah, there you go, Egyptian magic. It talks also about the Futhark, the runic alphabet, druidic ogham. This book is invaluable because no matter what spiritual tradition you're on, if you're trying to craft ritual magic for any purpose, this book will have the tools and the correspondences that you need to include in that rite. It's absolutely phenomenal how much this book has helped me. And I just know that no matter who you are, what your practice is, it will probably help you too. So I definitely recommend that. Now I'm at 35, nearly 36 minutes. I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank you for watching. Sorry it's been so long since my last video, but I am endeavouring to do more this year now that things are settling down. My son is back home. He's perfectly healthy. Getting things back to normal. Our house is getting done up. I'm going to the gym. I'm eating better. I'm sleeping better. And I'm finding more time on my hands now. So, look out for more videos in the near future. I'll be putting up some of my music on YouTube soon as well, so keep an eye out for that. And until my next video, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a very good day or night wherever you are in the world. May your gods go with you.